And that lastly, we want to also be a metro-wide influence on the local food system as it's developing in Denver. So, in so much as we make sure that our garden network is part of that there's a voice when we're talking about community food systems. Denver, for instance, just recently went through a local food systems planning process for about a 3-year period that the city led. And so community gardens are weaved into, and community farms and so forth, weaved into that whole process because of our involvement. So that's what we try as an organization to attain. Let me switch to the next one. As I said earlier, we test against everything we do for these 3 things. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing is supporting the community's desires. Right? This is their project, and what leads, after we work through an assessment process with them, what do they need from a technical standpoint to make their project come to fruition, and for them to lead that process. So we're always asking ourselves, how do we help them build their capacity? Not ours. Not forcing sort of our process when they're establishing a new garden onto them. It's more like, what do you have in place? What skills do you have in your community? Where do you stand with your project? And then we figure out how to support them forward. So that they own their project ultimately. This has been a question that we've had as an organization for over 15 years now, where what is the vision for the future in terms of how many gardens can we support, and how are we going to possibly support 300 of them when we're headed that direction? So it's been out of necessity over the years to figure out how to accomplish that, but in this necessity bred this wonderful way of thinking about it that is so figuring out ways to support volunteers and the community garden leaders so that those projects are sustainable as easily as possible from our standpoint. And so the things we'll talk about today are sort of outgrowths of that test we've always been facing, the demand in Denver. And then there's a very fine line between that we always are struggling with around avoiding creating dependency and a sense of entitlement. So some communities will come to us and think that we're going to do it all for them, and then they'll call us up next year, and come clean up the garden. So we try to avoid any of that sort of sensibility on their part. And we'll be very upfront with here's what we're trying to accomplish, and if you're not up for that, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board, or maybe this project isn't ready. But we're always testing against that as well, whether we're going to create some sort of dependency that's going to make the project unsustainable over time, or whether the folks that have come to us for support feel entitled somehow. An example of that would be we were asked by the Denver Botanic Gardens to take over their community garden because they had created a sense of dependency, and folks would come to them with the littlest problems. Please solve the fact that I've got bindweed growing in my plot. Because we pay you to do that, and we get this is the Denver Botanic Garden. So they had, without knowing, it created this terrible sense of dependency with the gardeners, and it's really hard to break that with folks. So we're always asking ourselves these questions when we're working on a new project or when we're dealing with an existing project. Thanks. So it all starts from the beginning in the garden approach. A community approaches us. We have yet to ever go into a community and say, we think you should have a garden. Because the map shows there's a huge gap here, there's high density population, there's significant need, and it's a food desert and you should have a garden. We never go into that kind of scenario. We do have mapping, we know where the gaps are, but we wait for communities to come to us for support because that is the number one criteria from our standpoint, is that the project is self-initiated by the gardeners or the committee of folks in the neighborhood or the school or whatever it is. If they don't think that's number one. And as I've described already about the community-led piece, at each stage we want to make sure that they lead the process. Whether it's arranging the first meeting where folks get together and start to talk about it, the design workshops that I run, if there's a landscape architect in the room, in the neighborhood, I'll let them run the project. It's all about them owning it at every stage, and to the point where, you know, quite often we get approached by a corporation who wants to, you know, build a garden and pay for it, and we'll say, no, we've got to go through all these steps because the community needs to own this project. Yes, it's awesome that you're going to support us and you're going to show up at volunteer days, but if the volunteer day isn't led by the community members are not there, and they're not getting the sweat equity, and they're not putting their own, you know, 15 bucks into the project, they're not coming to all the meetings and participating in the recruiting in their neighborhood and outreach, then it's not going to succeed. It's just from our, again, it's not because we're really having come up with that initially, it's just from our experience. I have gone through enough projects where our process has proven out that if it's not gone through this way, it is the project that's likely to fail. So the basic things we're looking for is that community-led piece, that there's a critical mass of participants. It's not a pet project of somebody's. That's always kind of hard to sniff out, but after you sniff one of those out, experience one of those projects, you know it when you see it. And that usually is a neighbor who wants to clean up a vacant lot, a teacher who, you know, is kind of rogue and wants to do stuff, but the rest of the school, the administration of the school, and the district isn't on board with it. That's a pet project. You know, you get pretty skilled at seeing those coming. In Denver in particular, our city is growing so fast that we avoid privately owned property to play. You know, we don't put a garden on privately owned property ever, or support one, because we know that land is just being speculated on. You guys know them all in different cities and different scenarios, but that's what we face. And so we always, and it's not a bad thing to approach projects the way we do, which is that we look for institutionalized property owners that we work with. Parks departments, open space departments, school districts, library districts, health campuses, so that more than just the land being more sustainable and not being sellable, that we also have a partner in the property owner, which has become super essential, and we'll talk about it kind of throughout for us, that when you have a partner, it's the property owner, and then you've got, you know, our organization and the volunteers we can bring to bear on the project, the community, and the landowner. If all three are kind of working together as partners, the project has this awesome potential to succeed long term, especially when we're at the table with the Parks Department and they're looking at revamping this certain park, and the community has come to them and said we want a garden as part of that park. And so we're at the drawing table with the Parks Department, not just asking them if we can, you know, carve a garden into their space. So when it's part of their sort of institutional process, we have another layer of sustainability. I thought when we talk about broad agency support, we're talking about the rest of the municipality agencies that are potentially supporters of that project. The water department, public works, city and city council, you know, sort of political layer, to make sure that everyone understands that this project is a permanent space, that it is serving the community and how it's serving the community, that it's more than just 20 gardeners. It's got a ripple effect to it. So there's a lot of outreach, and we'll talk about that when we do our little interactive session about what Doug specifically does around that, but that's critical. We also think a garden needs to be front and center in a community or on a property, so that it's in the everyday landscape of that neighborhood. I always get taken back to that corner of the school, or the, you know, this underused piece of ground over here, when, you know, I end up sort of pushing them to take out the front lawn of the school and we build a garden there instead, so that it has that everyday commitment from everybody. And then, of course, we're looking for a clean site that's got other advantages to it. So this is kind of the first layer of criteria that we look at when we're supporting a new project. And they've come to us to make sure that the site is a solid one. And that's kind of what I did. But then Laura and several others in our office work on the other part of government, which is the people. And so there's the sites and there's the people. And that one's almost more important. And the key piece to that is the community garden leaders. So that's the intro to our interactive session today. And I'll diverge briefly about a research study that you should all know about. It's coming down the pipe. And for those of you who were at our conference 3 or 4 years ago, we had folks from the Colorado University School of Public Health speak, who have been working on research of our gardens for over about a decade now. And the research findings were super promising around how healthy community gardening is, more than just backyard gardening, for lots of reasons. But the social piece, the cultural, the neighborhood connection, the sense of safety you feel, all of these things that factor into community health around community gardens, the researchers were finding, and we're kind of astounded at the level of findings as opposed to, or in comparison to other sort of health interventions. And so they decided that they needed to do what was missing was a clinical trial. You know that, I'm not a scientist, but a clinical trial being, we're going to test against a test group, what the impacts are starting, in your life to community garden. So the way they've done it is they've divided up people, they all get part of the study, then half get randomized to a wait list. So get to garden, and then you still take all the sort of tests that they take. But right now they're midway through this clinical trial. It's being funded by the American Cancer Society. $1 million research study for a 4-year project that's studying hundreds of our community gardeners around this issue. And the reason why I bring it up is that in their second year of the work, they've been very careful. They've alluded to us that one of the most important things is how engaging are your community garden leaders. Because trying to integrate into a garden of someone who's never gardened before for the very first time, they're looking to quit. This is really hard. It is hot out here. I don't want to do these weeds. When am I going to see the fruit and vegetables? My plants aren't growing as well as this season. I can't do this. So the garden leader is not there to support them. He doesn't have a mentoring sort of layer to supporting new gardeners. They're likely to quit to have far less success than they would have otherwise. And so we knew this intuitively, but it's really tuned us into how important that piece is. And so that brings us to our little exercise. I wanted to ask you guys what you think, given how important it is to have solid garden leaders. Again, we look to develop a steering committee. We found over the years that a single garden leader can be spectacular. Most likely not. Either burn out, they turn into kind of what would you say?
Benevolent despot?
Thank you. They become absent, and gardens can fall apart. People or people don't want to come to it because they, we do have a garden where we thought about last night. We have a garden where we have a garden leader who's a fantastic pipe piper and can do it all on their own. And sure enough, we have this one guy named Curtis at our Lowell Street garden. He is something else. He's just that kind of person. However, there's a lot of other things that get slip through the cracks. If you go to see his garden, you'd say, that's kind of shabby. But if you knew the community he's in and the sort of pipe piper he is, and it's an astounding leadership that he provides as an individual. But we have other examples of folks that we find alternatives for us. So we always are looking to help communities develop a steering committee, and one that overlaps in time and turns over, so everyone gets a chance to lead that wants to lead. We retain some institutional knowledge, so that ends up being, I'm going to be a leader for 2 or 3 years. So maybe in the first year I'm kind of learning about it, I'm, leading the membership piece, or I'm a treasurer on the leadership team, or I'm the main coordinator who gets all the contact and communications. But that second year, I really know what I'm doing, and the third year, I'm providing some, institutional knowledge to the next set. So that's what we're looking to do, whether it's 3 people or 5 people or something. I say an odd number because if there's ever a need for a vote, democracy. So when we talk about the ideal community garden leader and their characteristics, it's demonstrated. So let's get your input on what you think are, and we have our own list, but we want to, we'd love to learn from you if you have ideas. So let's brainstorm what that might be, and then we'll give you our list if you haven't come up with that complete list already. Yes. Who is this, by the way?
This is Bonita.
Bonita is awesome.
She missed
Say
out
hello
on
to
the
her.
number, but she was at Cleveland and Hartford. I think ideally a community garden leader is a lifelong learner, because as much as he or she might know a lot about gardening or how to do it all, people come with good ideas, and the garden leader should be open to what others are suggesting, or what the research shows, or whatever the source is. So, I know how to do this in the store is not a good attribute, but a lifelong learner.
Great. Others, come on, jump in. It's that Friday afternoon. There's no like a And by the way, I'm about to have one, because I'm heading down after this for the first time visiting my son at the University of Georgia. He's been there for 3 years. I'm sure they'll get it.
I was going to say, somebody who's representative of the community that they're serving.
Oh, that's really great. That's a great one.
Kind of tapping onto the lifelong learner, someone who is a people person and can kind of mold and work with a variety of personalities and interests and ideas, and is open to that, because some people think they're people, and then they realize that they're people that care to hear what those people.
I see the gardeners in my head that are that way.
Yes, open-minded.
The rule makers.
And it's somewhat focused. And yes, you can get off topic every once in a while, but having a clear focus will help keep your group in line, keep your meetings prompt and timely.
Sort of organized leader, an organized leader.
Organized.
Yeah.
I think you have to have somebody who's a consensus builder. They're not only open-minded to hear these things, but they're trying to bring other people into that shared agreement that kind of keeps it moving forward.
Going along with that, somebody who's respectful of other people's ideas, diversity, and just kind of consensus builder about inclusivity.
Optimism.
That's brilliant.
But,
So important.
And then maybe some resilience.
For sure, respect.
Yep. I don't know about you guys in your cities, but we have the usual theft and vandalism, and nature vandalizes our gardens with hail. I think we're the hail capital of the world. Denver is, yeah. So, yeah.
Surplus of talent.
Oof. Who has that? Yes,
Might be
absolutely.
the steepest word.
Yeah, right. That's a committee, but yeah, that's critical. And willingness to focus on it and make it important.
Team player, kind of mentioned in other ways, but
Team player,
yeah, the number of times that, right, I guess the number of times I've met people who are, they're working in a team, but they're very much think that their own way is the primary way to do it.
Right, so yeah, you can see those kind of people where they're, they're formulating their arguments rather than listening and sort of thinking through. We have gardens where the garden is turned into 3 groups, basically.
I think they have to be passionate. I think the leadership has to really not only embrace that that passion, but if you want to share that passion out, because that brings more people.
I totally agree with that. We were talking, that one of the things that we do in our garden leader training is we recommend that gardens, one of the very first things that they should do is sit down and think through, and maybe even do this annually at the beginning of the season. What principles drive our garden? What principles will we prioritize that we'll use as a check against issues that come up? Is this as important as this lead principle that we, put down as super important to all of us?
Creating the culture of the garden is important thing, just as
I think that's really awesome.
creating the culture and being able to, have the garden leader maintain that, represent that.
I think vision is important. Somebody that could not only, have all the attributes that you just named, but also have the vision to guide with those other attributes.
Yeah, with that, people will start to trust someone like that, right? That this person knows the best for us, we've been able to voice our thoughts. I trust them to that committee to make a good decision for us. Other ones, we don't have any track of time.
Empathetic.
I would say a good networker. A good network with not just the community, but broader organizations.
Absolutely great to have somebody that has that linkage and is willing to do that.
Well, there are different styles of leadership that probably work. I think a servant leader is ideally suited to do this job. Somebody who's, stylistic, well, it's my way or the highway, or I know better. Rather, it's the mission that we agreed upon that I'm helping to fulfill. That is my mandate. And people who might walk through the weeds, with their own agendas, bring me back to what our mission is. I'm serving the whole group.
Right, someone who might even be willing to say, this is not necessarily what I would do, but I think the whole group, has decided this for this on this topic. And so that's the direction we should go. Somebody that's willing to do that, absolutely. Great. Anything else?
One of the things I like to think about with flexibility, listening to the presentation yesterday, connecting with different members of the community, you have to be flexible to their schedules. So garden leader who is willing to meet people in the evening or on weekends, and who has a plot and garden themselves. That's important. Who is part of the community that they're supporting. Hard worker.
Right, no, this is a team player question, idea came up earlier, that you gotta be willing to
Share the word.
totally, you gotta be out there, on the work day that you arranged as a team, the strength committee should be out there doing some of it. Now, most of the time they do, and then they feel bad, they feel taken advantage of because they do a lot more of the work than they normally do, but you're right, the kind of leader that doesn't.
What about a cheerleader?
That was our enthusiastic
Yeah.
leadership. Yes, and that's the one, optimism, that whole element is super important. So that they're always looking at the best side of each situation. Yeah, that happened, but let's, we can probably solve that. We can turn this into a silver lining. We can spin this positively. And so this is helping us mature as a garden. This kind of thing is really helpful. So I think you guys did a fabulous job of coming up with the vast majority of the list that we have. We thought last night we better come up with what isn't. What are good traits? So you want to just rattle those off for grins, but
Right. So somebody who's a credit seeker, this is mine, who's not happy to sit in the background and let others take the credit. Somebody who's an authoritarian, micromanager,
that person who will, and when somebody comes into the garden, instead of saying, hi, how are you, beautiful tomatoes, is, why haven't you done your volunteer hours, right? My way or the highway, impatient, rigid, dismissive, somebody who only likes people like them, or, those are the only people that support those volunteers. Somebody who takes sides, you really need to have a mediator as a prime leader. A non-learner, somebody who doesn't keep that beginner's mind and can admit they're wrong. Starters have to be able to admit they're wrong. That's like long learners, we all do, right?
Like being present.
So there are many different, and this is wonderful, you guys did a fantastic job coming up with all of the different traits we look for in the garden leaders. Doug does many different things to facilitate our garden leaders, to facilitate their learning and to really support them. We have, every February, we have a garden leader symposium. And this is the one time of the year that all of the garden leaders come together. And, with 175 gardens, we've got over 100 garden leaders. We usually get about 150 together in February. It's a day of learning. We have classes that are relevant to the things that have been coming up over the last year. People want to learn more about composting in community gardens. Inclusivity, that was a big one 2 years ago that we felt was incredibly important to bring up and talk about at the symposium. So everybody can gather, they can network, and then we have 6 different classes offered throughout the day. And that's the one time they can get, the first time that all of the plot applications and any policy changes, any updates, that's when they are given that information as well. We also have a Master Community Gardener class. That is an 11-week train the trainer course. It's a hands-on class that really covers the nuts and bolts of starting a community garden, touches upon horticulture, communication, troubleshooting. It's fantastic for garden leaders. If a garden leader cannot commit to an 11-week course, we do have a garden leader training that we encourage all garden leaders to come to. It's perfect for new garden leaders. It's a 1.5 or 2 hour if you're a school-based community garden leader, because there's extra information for the schools to cover. But that covers the few boxes that need to be checked as a garden leader for Doug and for the landowner, but then lots of suggestions about how to make the garden better, how to build a skills map within their gardeners, how to find the people in the garden to help get all of the work done, and how to make it fun. Work is not work if you are laughing and enjoying yourself. One of our community gardens is in Aurora. There is a large number of Vietnamese gardeners in there, and the work days are so much fun. It's these women in dresses with baby straps for backs a lot of times, just laughing and pulling weeds, and it's just an amazing group of people. I don't understand their language, they don't understand mine, but we have the most incredible time working together. One of the things we really encourage for garden leaders to do, and gardens to do, is to celebrate. So we celebrate the garden leaders at the end of the year with a garden leader happy hour, a volunteer happy hour. We encourage that they do that within their gardens. We have to find a way to connect and build community on a regular basis. One of the new school-based gardens called Gables Community Garden. There were 2 different groups. There was a church interested in a community garden and this school. They were close enough together, the same interested people, that they kind of combined all of the school. It's great. They had a ribbon cutting ceremony that was fantastic. they have every Monday night, they have wine and weeding. Come to the garden,
We need to know whining.
We need to know whining, right? You can, enjoy the space, you know somebody will be there. There's another garden in Samuels that has a regular barbecue. You know, every Wednesday, you go to Samuels, there'll be people there, they have a barbecue. The whole community is invited, you don't have to have a plot. So that celebration piece is important. One of the things about my job that I really love is I get to model, to model with the garden leaders how I want them, how I would like them to work with our gardeners. So that connection piece. I would much rather meet with somebody in person or give them a phone call and shoot them an email. That connection, that if I haven't heard from somebody in 3-4 weeks, they haven't turned in their plot applications, it's a hi, how are you? Not a what's going on, why haven't you done this yet? So that personal connection is important, and also the flexibility, also nice and weekend.
All right, so now we'll shift gears to the other topic, given that we're probably
Yeah.
pushing everybody's time frame. So the idea of how to support a community garden and thinking through the ways that they can connect to their neighborhood better, they can connect to their the city agencies that are jurisdiction over their property, neighborhood groups, how they might be able to create, this linkage that's beyond just their isolated space that they often feel is, that they're the ones they care about, right? And so, we do several things as an organization. What we want to do first, get your input as to what you think in your worlds that makes sense to support community gardens. So, ideas about how you would propose to a community garden leadership at a particular location to connect.
We're working to create a very thorough, comprehensive directory of gardens so that people can figure out exactly what's going on with other community gardens in their area. See if there are projects that they are working on that would be helpful for the gardeners.
That's great.